I'm here until 3 o'clock when I have to leave to the airport, so.
Well, speaking of impact on issues and how we study things and have positions, on the table over there is the Kentucky version of impact on issues. It's called With One Voice. And that has all of our state positions in it. Now it's online. You can go to our website. Yes.
It's also on the app. We just put it on the app. So
Well, there you go. You got the app and you got With One Voice, and that has all of our state positions. So thank you very much, Virginia. It's great to there's a lot of exciting things that are happening with National League, as you can tell. All right, well, we are going to move on to the business meeting. I'm going to have Dot, why don't you come up here and sit here? I'm appointing Dot Ridings, who incidentally, for anybody who does not know, Dot was national president of the League of Women Voters in, what were the years, Don?
In the 80s, I don't know.
In the 80s. In the 80s, yes. So we're always very proud of having Dot around, and she wants me to say she's not a registered parliamentarian, but she certainly has been through enough meetings that I think we can rely on if we have any questions of parliamentary procedure. So we'll let Dot sit here. Also, I'd like to say this is Jennifer Fitch, and she is our secretary. And when if you have a question or a comment as we go through this business meeting, please give your name and your league. And that's true for virtual people who might have a question or a comment. And of course, the ones here in this room, because that'll help. And you stop us, Jenna, if we forget. And because she needs that for the minutes for this part. Okay. Well, we're going to begin to talk about program. For those of you who have packets, and I hope everybody's got one of those purple folders with the information in it. We're going to talk about, well, for those of you also who are not familiar, usually in our first business meeting, we present the program and we'll present the budget and have discussion, and we'll present the nominees and have discussion, but we don't vote until the afternoon. So don't worry about having your app ready to vote, because we don't vote till this afternoon. This is a chance for you to hear an explanation and to have some discussion about it. So we're going to start with the first proposed part of the program, which is Kentucky's legislative action priority, restoration of voting rights for those previously convicted of a felony. And Cindy Heine from Lexington is going to do this once a week.
Good morning. I can't help but think of our president who tripped and fell over a sandbag when I see all these photos. Any of us can do that. I'm Cindy Heine, Lexington League. We had been working on restoration of voting rights for people who have felony convictions for a long time. We adopted a position in 2005, issued a report in 2006. I may have that turned around. And have continued ever since. I have to say, I did not pay Joe Girth to say what he said last night, because when asked what we should focus on, for those of you who weren't here, he said restoration of voting rights. And Virginia, wherever you are, thank you, and thank our dear president in Washington for her remarks. It is a huge issue. It is a huge issue. Despite Governor Beshear's executive order in 2019 that restored voting rights to over 178,000 people, over 161,000 people still are not able to vote. They remain disenfranchised. They have completed sentences, they have paid their dues, they ought to be able to vote. Kentucky is one of only 3 states that permanently ban people who've completed their sentence from voting. One of only 3 states. Kentuckians support a constitutional amendment to change that and automatically restore voting rights by 2-1. We did another poll in January. 68% of our folks in Kentucky in that poll approve of restoring voting rights. We also have just recently seen a new report that shows that restoring voting rights increases public safety. When people re-enter the community, get into jobs, raise their children, pay their taxes, and vote, they become more a part of the community. They are much less likely to get into trouble again. So it increases public safety, and that's a really important reminder for us. We need an amendment to provide clarity and consistency, because what happens now is governors can issue executive orders and pardon people and give them the right to vote. But the next governor could come along and rescind that executive order in a flash. And then there's much confusion about who is and who is not able to vote. We need a permanent fix that is in our Constitution. As I said, we've been working on this for a long time. We think we are closer than ever to getting a bill passed, and I'll be talking about that a little bit in my legislative update. But there is support from leadership in the Senate to pass a bill this time. So we are very hopeful that we can be successful this year. The other thing that we are proposing that we do as we move forward is help to identify those people whose voting rights have been restored and get them on the path to registration and voting. And that may be through expungement clinics, through talking to people with the right information when they are registering people to vote. And your app can help you with that. So we'll talk about that a little bit later too. So that's program issue number 1.
I want to ask questions. Oh, Frank, will you just restate the question for people in the room because the virtual attendees can't hear it?
We will. Questions? I think we're good.
Okay. Thanks. You need me to restate it right now?
Just if somebody asks a question in the room.
Oh, that we need to.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay, all right. Okay, now the next person the next issue is Kentucky Legislative Action Priority Reduction of Gun Violence. And Steve Son is going to lead our discussion of that. Steve has been our treasurer, and he's moving on to an issue that he has felt very passionately about for a long time. But you have to walk, this is an obstacle course.
Okay, well, I wasn't quite sure what the sequence was going to be here, but let me start out by just expressing one personal viewpoint. Our Virginia mentioned earlier about holding up a mirror at the national level. And I've often thought that we should all stand in front of a mirror sometime and say, self, how well am I doing as a member of the government of the people and by the people? So that's my personal introduction. Going to the issue here. The league for many years has had a position about gun control. I'm reading from the league position. The 1990 convention took the then rare step of adopting the gun control position by concurrence. And I'll go on and read a more recent version because the league's position has been updated a number of times. The League of Women Voters believes that the proliferation of handguns and semi-automatic assault weapons in the United States is a major health and safety threat to its citizens. The league supports strong federal measures to limit the accessibility and regulate the ownership of these weapons by private citizens. The league supports regulating firearms for consumer safety. One of the things that I think is an accurate description of our current situation is that the American people, a large part of the American people have been brainwashed. I have a copy of the Brady letter from a year ago. And this article is the headline, "The Brainwashing of America." And the general concept that has been promoted is that somehow you're better off if you have a gun. And that's not really true by looking at the statistics. Of course, people don't really like to make up their minds much based on statistics, unfortunately. But anyhow, part of the Brady description here, the NRA's deadly influence. In 1999, a poll by the Hopkins Bloomberg Public Health, most gun owners kept guns for hunting and target shooting. Only 26% cited protection. But by 2015, similar poll, 63% of gun owners cited self-defense as their primary reason for gun ownership. You must think about the fact that when you acquire a gun for self-defense, you're planning on shooting somebody else. Unfortunately, that doesn't really isn't really the idea that the NRA has been promoting. Along those lines, there's a couple of other pieces of data I think I'd like to pass on. One is that access to a gun in the home increases the death by suicide by 300%. I imagine most of the people here know that a majority, okay, over 50% of all gun deaths are suicides. This is a concept that, of course, is consistent with this idea that you should have a gun for self-protection. That's not the way guns mostly get used to kill somebody. Another statistic from this newsletter, every 16 hours, a woman is shot dead by her current or former partner. So the idea that you're safer if you have a gun is just not true. So I think that that's the basic data. One other item I think I should mention is that, of course, here in Louisville, unfortunately had the recent shooting at the bank, and go back to the Breonna Taylor event. But these high publicity types of shootings don't really address the actual situation, because in 2022, there were about 120 people shot every day, killed by gunshot every day in the United States. So this is how bad the situation is, even though it doesn't get much publicity. As I say, most of those gunshot deaths are suicides. So just having ready access to a gun, this three increases, as I mentioned, the risk of death by shooting by 300%, according to the Brady organization. So I think that's all I want to say at this time about this issue. I guess, are there any questions?
Well, Steve, when we don't have to study this issue. As Steve said, we've got a national position under which we can act. The idea is to be much more active in the legislature this year. Is that?
Yes, right. I'm not sure how well we'll do it persuading legislators, but that's what we want to try.
That's the general idea.
Yes.
Are there any questions? Okay, thanks so much, Steve. Now you have to walk the.
Yes.
Hold on.
Right.
There was a question.
Steve,
Yes.
you took my agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I need my agenda back. So I know where we are.
Right.
All right, okay. Did you have anything else?
Well, I didn't.
Okay.
Whether there are any questions.
Okay.
There was a que-
Oh,
there is a question.
What is it? Here, Joe.
Name.
Yeah. Mary Jo Rogers, Louisville. Okay, Mary Jo, go ahead. Are we, Mary Jo asked if we're going to partner with anybody in the state, and I don't know that the logistics have been worked out, have they? Steve is obviously going to work closely with Cindy, who's our
Yes.
legislative liaison, and will be, well, and Mary Jo. Mary Jo and Cindy. So Mary Jo, there's something to work on. Because we will, yes, we do have partners we'll need to work with. Okay, let's go on. Our next one is legislative transparency and procedural reform. And that's Susan Weston, and Susan's virtual. So let's hear what Susan has to say.
Good morning. Let me check that I'm coming through clearly.
We can hear you, yes.
Thank you. The legislative transparency issue is deep in the weeds, but we think it's important defense of democratic participation. The issue we're working on is when the legislature handles any bill to govern our lives. The classic process is the bill is filed and we can read it. There's a committee hearing and we can be heard. After the hearing, there are 3 different readings on the floor of each chamber. And the effect of those readings is one is the day of the committee hearing, but they can't vote that day. The next day they have another reading and they still can't vote. Only on the 3rd day after they've held the committee hearing can they move to a vote. And that's the window when citizens can most be heard. What has been happening over the last 20 some years is they've invented a new process where they hold the readings before the committee vote, which means they can vote 2 hours after the committee meets on the floor. We saw that this year in the horrible bill, Senate Bill 150, that we opposed as a league, attacking the rights of transgender Kentuckians and especially our children. And that bill, both the House and the Senate railroaded it through, approving a committee sub late in the morning and voting on it that afternoon and not allowing floor amendments because the floor amendments hadn't been filed 24 hours earlier when the committee substitute didn't exist. So this is a process of speeding everything up so that there is no space when citizens can be heard. What we are doing as a small task force right now is working through the legislative record to document how this works and how it has accelerated. It's deep in the weeds work, reading through every bill that passed in 7 different legislative sessions to show the trends. We're right now going in deeper on checking the first round of listing that off. Our plan is to build a report for the league. Our plan is to propose a plan of action, which we know will take multiple years, to move the legislature toward not doing that to us as citizens. So the issue is getting the legislature to go back to a slower process with room for the rest of us to participate. And we're going to try to bring deep documentation and care with data as the tool we have that we can bring to a process where we understand how outpowered we are. We hope it will help, and I will welcome questions.
Any questions for Susan?
Harriet Seiler from Louisville. This is a related question, but I wished over last night and been here to comment, to hear that and to comment on it, because I think it will be very important as the work progresses to involve the press.
Yes, and for those who get virtual that might not have heard Harriet comment, it was that we need to get the press involved in this, because there certainly have been opinion pieces in the paper by a variety of people, Al Cross and Joe Berth and others, talking about how transparency in the General Assembly and rules of order are deteriorating, and things have just gotten bad. So we thank the committee for all the work they're doing on this. Any other questions for Susan? Okay, yes,
Well, I'm Sally Hanswell, Louisville. I'm just astounded that somehow that's legal. You know, that there's not anything in place, any procedures that.
well, you're,
May I?
can you hear it?
Yes, yes, I heard the question. One of the things we will have to work on, the Constitution of Kentucky says the bill must go to a committee and must have 3 readings. One way to handle this is to say what they are doing may be unconstitutional. We could leap to just saying it is, cut it out. But we're working on what's the best chance of shifting the power quickly. And it's possible that a softer touch, where we don't say it is unconstitutional, we say we're concerned, might move it more quickly. And that's going to be a strategic choice in figuring out how to do the report and organize the campaign. We definitely see the problem. We're just working on how do we try to cross a very rapidly flowing river without just getting knocked over.
So actually what they're doing is unconstitutional by Kentucky's constitution.
I'm not ready to say that firmly yet. That it's a strategic choice. They don't like it when we whack them with the Constitution. We'll do it first if it's a smart strategy. We'll do it later if it's a smart strategy. But we may not begin by telling them, you are very, very bad children. We may begin with a sweeter, would you please open up better space for citizen participation? That's the thing we have to work out as we think through the issues.
Becky?
Becky Jones from Northern Kentucky. And my question to Susan, and you may have said it and I just didn't hear, are we working with political reporters to get input on what they observe in the legislature?
Not yet. We are doing our own homework using the legislative record to document the process right now. That's a good idea for ways we can move forward. And certainly the point of doing a report will be in part to move this into media attention. But we haven't started by asking them what's happening. We're starting by getting our feet really firmly under us about how this has worked over the 7 legislative sessions we're studying.
Oh,
Follow up. I would just add that Northern Kentucky posted a political reporter from our region and papers. His name is Mark Payne, and he brought up this very issue of Senate Bill 150 and all of the work. He specifically said that he had a question about an open meetings violation because he discovered one of the state senators meeting with a lobbyist on the state Capitol stairs at 10 o'clock at night, formulating a plan for what would be presented the next morning for a vote. And he helped himself to their conversation because they were in an open public space. They didn't take very kindly to his ear, but so I think there is information out there that we could probably incorporate into our research.
Susan, were you able to hear those comments?
Yeah, I heard that. I think reporters are good sources. And we're going to try to pull together a full set of knowledge and contribute something new to it in terms of the long-term process. Cindy Heine has been raising concerns about this process for at least 6 years that I can remember. And one of the effects of Senate Bill 150 was that 3 other people showed up. I was one of them who said, yeah, now it's time. Cindy was already ready. The rest of us caught up on seeing how severe the abuses were with Senate Bill 150 because they did it in both chambers and they did it deep and they did it hard and they did it mean.
150 was the transgender bill that's Susan's referring to. Okay, yeah, Patty.
Patty Pineapple Rule, I want to make a quick comment. I'm working with Susan and Cindy and Jane Lemmel on this working group. I want to really let you know what the work that Susan has done to dig into the legislative record since 1998 so that we can see it under Democratic and Republican leadership, and has identified almost 300 bills that did not go through the process. And we're now checking her data and then we'll analyze what those bills were, what the twists were that they used to get around. So as Susan was pointing out, we're trying to get the data behind us, and then we'll figure out who else we engage in the process.
Thanks, Patty. Mayor Joe, did you have a question or comment?
In just moseying around in the legislature, and listening to comments, is there any other group, and this has been was hard to answer, we're gonna look for the groups, but any other groups that are really upset about this? Like the council of churches or, any other group that just really gets very upset?
Susan, could you hear that?
I heard the question, which was about whether there are other groups that are upset about this process.
Yes.
We have not started looking yet for any formal alliances. But my hunch is everyone who watched how Senate Bill 150 was done, that we have allied with in the past, will be concerned. We're doing some deep digging and preparing the field right now before we start trying to grow the next set of efforts.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Patty,
Patty can have one.
and your lead.
Louisville.
Okay, thank you.
All right, our next,
Actually, Susan, there's another question in the chat from Wita Meyer, and she asked, is there a start of session rules adoption process for the Kentucky League?
Well, Kentucky, I think she means Kentucky legislature, the
Oh.
way that's spelled. Yes, there is
Sorry.
a process for adopting the rules. If we're going to win a big victory, the place we will win it is in the rules they adopt in some future session. And the classic things we would ask for would be the committee hearing is before any of the readings, and something about when we will have access to committee substitutes, which can be complete replacement bills. And if you've been planning testimony, you go crazy because you were planning to testify on one bill and you arrive in the committee and they say, oh, it's a different bill. All your criticisms are irrelevant. Or some of them are. You get to guess which ones are relevant. So yes, the legislative process of adopting the rules is our target for getting them to change things.
okay, Jen, any other online questions? Just interrupt if there are, all right, thank you, Susan, so much. We're so proud of the work that you're doing with this task force. Okay, our fourth issue is a report in action, Kentucky Clerk Certification Program, and Jen Jackson's going to give that explanation.
Hi, you all. I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Lexington and also chair of voter services for the state league. This project really kind of stemmed from noticing that the State Board of Elections was not posting complete voting information. They generally have a website that has like a one-stop shop for all the different counties, which will post Dropbox locations, early voting dates, election dates, and locations. But the absent thing was the early in-person absentee voting, which is a long name for the kind of extra early voting, or what you may have thought of as absentee voting when we used to have like 30 days to go before the election, which is now 6 days. So I brought it to their attention and they continue not to post that information. And there was some suggestion that the local county clerks would have that information. And so we started to pay attention and we looked at local county clerks to see if the information was there. And while some of the counties did have that information, a majority of counties did not have information. And sometimes their websites were sorely out of date, maybe information from 8 years ago, or they didn't have a website. And so then it really becomes very important for that information to be posted with the State Board of Elections. A second election cycle came, information was still not posted. We kept bringing it to their attention. And the response was, we didn't post it last time, so we're not planning on posting it this time either. So, you know, anybody that's planned a party knows that you need to tell people the time, the date, and the location if you expect people to show up. And so we need to be telling people the basics of how they can vote in Kentucky. And so, it's great. There are options for, we have these 3 days of early voting and all of this. And that's wonderful. But if we're not telling people how to actually do those things, then it doesn't really work for us. And so, so 2 weeks before the election, when we noticed that this information was not posted and it probably wasn't going to be posted, another league volunteer, Rish ICAT, he's there in person with us today, and Matthew Ruberg, who does a lot of work with ranked choice voting. We dove into all of the county clerk's websites. We have an elaborate spreadsheet. We documented exactly what was there, taking screenshots and sort of like grading them on what the types of information that they have. And so our plan was to present a report, but it's the same thing of, okay, so we have this insidious situation of like, okay, well, maybe they just failed to put voting information, but it is this insidious kind of voter suppression. But also thinking about the ways that we can entice people to do good behavior instead of like beating them over the head about bad behavior. So we really wanted a carrot to entice county clerks to post this information. And so on one of these national Zoom meetings, I got connected with the Texas League, who has a county clerk certification program where basically they evaluate each county clerk for each election cycle, each like fall election cycle. And they get a certificate if they have, the information for voting, and it's sort of graded like, they get an excellent, or they get like, you're doing an adequate job. And so that way it becomes an enticement for the bragging rights for the county clerks to say, we actually have this information posted for voters, and hey, the League of Women Voters thinks we're doing a great job. And so we wanted to bring that here to Kentucky, and that is our goal. We have all this wonderful information that we have collected. And so, we want to translate that into direct action and enticing our county clerks, all 120 of them in the state of Kentucky, to post basic voting information. Now, I will say that it was like a small personal like victory. Like sometimes I feel like, we do a lot of advocacy, we're building relationships, we're writing the emails, and like nothing happens. And I don't know if it's because I kept writing them emails saying, please post this information about early in-person absentee voting, but it was there this time around. And so even though in November it was adequate not to post it because they didn't do it before, I don't know if it was my emails or something else happened, but it's there now. And so I'm hoping that will continue for the fall election. But I think sometimes when you bring these things to light and people are paying attention, then county clerks and our election officials are going to start making basic information transparent. And so that is the goal of this project, is to provide a carrot to get county clerks to post voting information, which you think would be part of their job.
Any questions for Jen? Yes, Debbie.
Debbie Watt, Louisville too. I'm originally from Texas, and my question is, in Texas, there is an organization called the V.G. Young Institute of County Government, located on the campus of Texas A&M. They provide training for all different county officials. There may be a training for clerks. There may be a training for county treasurers and so forth. And then they may not be the only organization that provides training for elected officials, but does Kentucky have something that would, if someone's elected, the idea that someone can be elected county clerk and not go through any training for the job is really scary. Does Kentucky have an organization that is training all county officials?
Could you hear that, Jen?
Yeah, so I don't know. I do know there's a, there is a board of county clerks. I'm not exactly sure what their role is in terms of training and that type of thing. So that was an interesting thing to explore. And so thank you for that. I love it when people bring different ideas and we're able to kind of, move forward with that and looking at what other people have done instead of recreating the wheel. So that's a great place to start looking at that as well. One thing I will say, and what we noticed in the data collection was that several of these small counties are using the same webmaster to put their information. And what we noticed was that there was the same mistake on multiple websites. So one of the issues was that they left off one of the days of in-person absentee voting. And so that day was left off of, I can't remember the exact number, but it was like 15 different counties had the exact same thing. And you could tell because the format was kind of exactly the same on each website. And then when we looked at it, we're like, oh, this is the same builder of this website that's managing all of these. And actually, when we called one of the counties and brought it to their attention, they actually changed it. So, and they notified apparently their web developer, because in the process of us collecting this information in this 2 weeks before the election, we noticed that subsequent websites that we were evaluating had the information correct. So it makes me hopeful that things can change when it's brought to their attention. And I know that some county clerks, they may not have web experience, or they may, they don't look at the website or not noticing that it's out of date. I mean, I get it. Like, I help manage the Lexington's website and some of the state's website. And so I appreciate when people tell us like, hey, this link's not working. So, I want to kind of assume the best of people and hope that when we start bringing this to their attention, that people are going to, county clerks are going to start providing that information, because we live in a digital age. We're not looking at our phone books to find out information. We Google things. And so voters are not going to be calling county clerk's office to find out when voting is. The first thing they're going to do is pick up their phones and do a search. And if it's not there, are they really gonna go the extra effort and call? They might just be like, yeah, whatever, I'm busy today, I've got to do some other stuff, I'm not gonna make a plan, whatever. So anyway, I love that, if people have other ideas of how to really help get this program going, and we are also going to need volunteers to look at those websites and collect the data. Fortunately, Texas has a process all set out, so we're just going to be sort of reusing that. And so it's going to make it super easy for people to kind of jump in, look at one of the websites. And the thing is that you don't have to be an expert in voting, because it's actually better if you're just a regular person, because that's who's using the websites, right? That's who we need to be able to find the information, are just the regular voters who are going there to get information. So, sometimes while we were looking at voting information, I think sometimes the county clerks got a little bit of a better grade because we knew what we were looking for. But that's not the kind of field testing that we need.
Okay, Marcia.
Question, but it seems like there should be a law that they have to do this. If this isn't optional, what they post on it. This is mandatory.
Marsha Weinstein.
Marsha Weinstein. That's all. But I guess it's too much trouble to get a law passed, but it seems like there needs to be a law.
Well, I agree. And I think that, that's something we need to work for, but sometimes it's faster and easier to, give somebody a special certificate for doing what they should be doing instead of having to go through a whole legislative process. But if we need to push on that, because, being, I guess, giving people the benefit of the doubt and being nice about it, if that's not working, then sometimes we gotta, get our legislative muscle out and advocate for those types of things.
I'm cognizant of the time, and I'm going to kind of move on. Jen will be glad to talk with you about about this anytime in the future, but I do want to move on. Our final thing for recommended program is actually a study. We haven't done a state study in quite a while. It's a study of ranked choice voting in open primaries in Kentucky. And Becky Jones from Northern Kentucky is going to present that.
So this is a topic that has a few leagues have already started investigating, a few local leagues. In your packet, I won't reiterate everything that's in there. There are 2 pages that I want to direct your attention to. One is the National League of Women Voters Electoral Guidance, and a couple of sentences that are critical. The National League's position doesn't support any particular election method, but rather supports the LWV goals for an open governmental system that is representative, accountable, and responsive. And then down at the bottom paragraph, the LWVUS supports enabling legislation to allow local jurisdictions to explore alternative electoral methods, as well as supporting state election laws, allowing for more options at both state and local levels. And then there's a second insert in your packet that is the LWVKY 23-24 study methodology, which lays out how we propose to explore this topic and then report back next year. So June of 23, we hope that we will adopt this study for the coming year. Critical to it will be the formation of the study committee in July. And that will need to include at least one representative from each local league and state administered league. Our study committee will include other state league studies that currently exist. So we'll be taking advantage of existing information. And that's one reason that we think that this study can be completed in 1 year's time. I would also just mention to you a nonprofit, nonpartisan, all volunteer organization, Rank the Vote Kentucky, and it's rankthevoteky.org. Jen Jackson had mentioned a volunteer named Matt Ruber. Matt is more than willing to do presentations on behalf of Rank the Vote Kentucky to local leagues. If you're interested in just hitting the ground running while the study committee is working as well, I would suggest you go to rankthevotekentucky.org and then you can learn more there on your own. The rest of the program or the methodology is laid out there, with the conclusion being that the league's state board would determine if we have reached consensus or concurrence on any questions raised. Questions on that? Yes.
Is there any plan?
Name.
Elizabeth Fox, Southern Kentucky. Are there any plans on the national level to adopt a policy on ranked choice voting or a position?
Virginia, are you aware of any plans from national?
No, but states like Maine and others do have positions and use it. The national office has been studying, and we think that specifically around ranked choice voting, it's better left to states and locals to decide what is appropriate for their communities.
Okay. Any other questions?
And just for a record, I am also a board member of Rank the Vote Kentucky. So I am also available if anyone
And this
would
is
like
Elizabeth
someone to come
Fox.
speak. Yes.
Yes.
And Matt and I are both founding members and remaining board members.
Great. And I know Elizabeth, of course, is from Southern Kentucky.
Correct.
And Matt is from Northern Kentucky.
And Matt
that's
lives in Louisville.
Yeah, okay, so that's why we have connected. Great, thanks, Elizabeth. I'd forgotten that you're a board member too. Terrific. Wonderful.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, but all of the local leagues do be planning on having some programming on this year. Of course, our luncheon speakers are going to be talking about this topic today. But having some local programming, and in the spring, you'll notice that's when we would ask all local leagues to be arriving at a consensus or concurrence, whichever way. So as you're making out your calendar for the year, please put that in. So I think that's going to be exciting for all of us. Thank you. Those are the program recommendations. Richard, come on up. Richard's going to do go through the budget with us. Let me just say, I think we may run a little bit over on this part. What I think we may do, Cindy, is we'll keep the legislative, state legislative action for after lunch. Okay. All right. Come on up, Richard.
Richard, hi, Lexington, and right now I'm an advisor. I'm an advisor to the finance. I was the chairman of the budget committee. I appreciate all the work that the budget committee did. You have the budget in your packet. I call your attention to just a couple of things. If you may have noticed that per member payment dues are a little behind this year. If you notice 1920, that's because, hate to say this, but Louisville hasn't paid their dues to the state yet. but I'm sure that they will. They just haven't got
Our money as long as possible.
All right, thank you, Dee. If you noticed that.
We don't have the money yet.
Oh, no, you do. This last year stuff. Anyway, the other one I call your attention to is down there in expenditures, board member insurance. The board voted to have a insurance policy for the board. And so we actually added a line. So that's why there's nothing. We actually paid it this year, but there's nothing in the budget last year. The other things I call your attention on the second page, committee expenses, communications have become to be quite active. And so that was their request. And we actually added a couple of items from last year's budget. So it ended up being a little larger. There's the restoration of voting rights. We got several grants this last year to work on restoration of voting rights. And it's possible we may get grants this next year, but we have budgeted in our budget money for that purpose. There's the study of ranked choice voting. And again, it's the production of information and passing it around and all that sort of stuff. There's the voter services. I think that next year we're going to have a whole bunch of votes in the next year because we've got a bunch of elections. And then the K-cell funding, the request of the board was that we dedicate some money for each one of these new state administered leagues. Is that what they're called? Okay. And we have one in Northern Kentucky and it's very active. We have one in Southern Kentucky now, and it's beginning to be very active. And there's a lot of conversation about having some in other places as well. But we determined, the board said that we really ought to just, they don't know if they have, because we handle all of their finances. So that if they have some requests, they do something that we can actually pay it out of the budget. So those are the only things that I have. Are there other questions, comments? Oh, I guess I should tell you that we're overspending there are a lot more expenditures than income. Hey,
Judy Lippman, Louisville, and it's a state administered league, a regional league?
Yes.
Is that what that means?
there's one in Northern Kentucky, and I think they have 3 or 4 counties. And there's one in Southern Kentucky.
Six.
Couple
Is it
counties.
more than 6? It's a lot. It's
6 counties, yes, they're regional.
Is there a list of what cities are included in those?
I can tell you, let's see.
I mean, is there written down someplace?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
okay,
we specifically chose to do the Brad region, Barren River Area Development District. Because so much of what happens in Southern Kentucky, it's always that whole area. So those are the counties that we chose. Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't get that name.
Judy Lippman, Louisville.
Other questions, comments? I guess I should call your attention to the fact that there's a whole lot more expenses here than income. And if you notice, if you look at the balance sheet, which is down there on the bottom, it turns out that we actually have a fairly sizable balance. And that we're not sure that we'll have to use as much from the balance as we have planned here, because we get grants to do certain things. But it was our determination that it was important for us to do that. The other thing I guess you need to know is that we now have that administrative assistant, which this is our first year to do that. And we've given her a raise, if you notice.
Well-deserved one.
I'm sorry?
A well-deserved.
A well-deserved one.
She works
yeah,
hard.
Absolutely. So that's one of the reasons. So actually, any question, we'll vote it this afternoon. If somebody needs changes or comments, we need to do it now. All right, great.
Thanks, Richard. You might want to go around the
Go
other way.
around the other
You might
way.
go around the other way. So. Okay, and we're, Pat Morella is going to present the nominating committee report.
So what are, shouldn't our dues match? What's the agenda?
Good morning.
Yeah.
First, I want to thank the committee. Valerie Veers, Anita Simmons, Hopkinsville, Karen Brown,
So why?
Cindy Heine. And I also want to give a plug. Valerie Veers is from Louisville, and she has just been accepted in the Foreign Service and will be leaving Louisville at the end of June. So we are very proud of her. She was here last night, some of you may have seen it. Okay. The slate of officers for 2-year terms are President Jen Jackson. Can we bring her up?
The projector is overheating, so
Oh, no.
is that okay?
Well, you've been introduced to Jen Jackson, and she's currently co-president of Lexington, and she's on the state board, doing voter service. She's also the one bringing us kicking and screaming into the 21st century. So she's administering the League in Action and the Google Workspace and all that stuff. She's also on an LWVKY committee for evaluating potential new membership management platforms. She is a retired pediatric nephrologist. And she likes paddle boarding with her husband, cooking, gardening, playing guitar, and hanging out with her dog Piper. Yeah. For first vice president, Becky Jones from Northern Kentucky. Would you stand, Becky? She has served as coordinator and chairperson of NKY League. And her league interests include working with restoration of voting rights, legislative, and Vote 411 committees. She is the owner of Smith Jones Consulting, and she spends her family time with husband, daughter, son-in-law, and 1-year-old grandson. Our second vice president is Margie Cheresika. She had a previous engagement, so she isn't here. By profession, Margie is a nurse and a nurse educator. She is the immediate past president of our Louisville League. And she took office just before we closed for the pandemic. And I cannot praise her enough for keeping us alive. She truly saved us. We are pleased that our secretary, Jennifer Fitch, has agreed to serve a second term. She and her husband are new to Kentucky, been here 3 years. Came for Jennifer's position, which is that she is the director of payer relations and contracting at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. She was previously a member of the Ohio League. And for treasurer, Richard Heine. He's been a league member for 30 years, has served on both local and state boards, and has served as treasurer for both local and state. He retired from government services after 30 years in the Cabinet for Health and Human Services. And now there's a caveat. He's agreed to serve for 1 year and train his successor. So here's the bolo to everyone here in this room. You've got to find someone to work with Richard to take over as treasurer. So, thank you all. Yeah, I had to skip.
You got the nominating committee.
The new nominating. The nominating committee is made up of 3 elected people, and then the board appoints 2 more. So the 3 that we are nominating are Anita Simmons has agreed to serve again, Mary Hughes from Lexington, and myself.
And thank you to the whole nominating committee. Anybody who has served on a nominating committee knows it ain't easy. And found some wonderful people